Hello everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Console Log. If you hear me sounding a little bit weird, it's because I'm a little under the weather. Either I have allergies, a cold, or a virus. No one can tell me what's wrong with me except that I'm not my usual non-nasal self. So thank God for Ricola, because without that I would not be able to talk to you right now. It's not that bad, but definitely Ricola helps me out a little bit. This is episode number 40 of the Console Log. This is the week of June 11th through June 17th. We are right into the summer months here in New York City. Things are getting hot, and I am sweating every day more and more. But let's talk about some of the really hot things that happened this past week in the world of JavaScript. I got some really cool Vue.js news up front, as well as some really awesome React news at the end. So stick around to the end, because that's when I talk about all the React stuff, and I know that everybody loves hearing about things in the world of React. So let's get the show started. As promised, we talk about Vue.js, that's Vue.js, a very big competitor. It's not a competitor, it's just another alternative framework in the world of JavaScript frameworks. Three fun Vue things to tell you about this week. The first one, there was a little fun contest to see when Vue.js would outreach the number of stars on GitHub, and this past week it managed to surpass React in the number of stars, so congrats Vue.js. Even though stars are meaningless, it's still kind of interesting to see the number of people hitting that star button is more for Vue.js than it is for React.js, so cool. There was also this other project released this past week called Vue Native, and this is a very interesting project because if you've ever played with Vue.js before, you know they have this thing called a .vue file, which contains the template, the styles, and the logic for your components all contained in one file. And that's a very powerful abstraction, which I kind of wish other frameworks would adopt, because I think it's kind of a nice thing to have. But there's a new project that came out this past week called Vue Native that would actually take these .vue files and actually compile it down to native code that you actually run on your phone, iOS or Android. And the way that it does this is pretty wild. It actually takes your Vue code and translates it into React and then React Native code. So there's so many layers of indirection here, but it's just very wild to see the transportability of these frameworks where you have Vue.js to React, React Native, and React Native has all its own wild things making that actually work in the native WAM. But if you are a Vue.js developer, I would definitely say check this out if you want to make a mobile application, because if you haven't played with React Native before, it is really magical, the things you can do there. So now you can actually do the same thing with a .vue file. Now we need to spit this out. And last but not least, Vue.js. There's a roadmap they posted for Vue.js, and I'm sure this has been around for a while, but when I just saw this, Vue is now in the 2.x series, and for Vue 3.x, there is plans to actually rewrite Vue.js entirely in TypeScript, which is very interesting to hear, just showing that most of the major frameworks are leveraging whatever type system that they can to make sure that they can actually maintain their projects better. So React uses flow type, and Vue.js is going to go use TypeScript. Angular uses TypeScript. So it shows you that, yes, JavaScript is great. It's very duck typing, all that things. It's very flexible. However, if you do have a large application that you're working on, a large project, having a type system to actually lean on does provide some stability and comfort that you kind of need if you actually want to have it grow beyond any reasonable size. There's only so much you can keep in mind before you actually have to have some of that offloaded to the computer itself. So it won't affect end users of Vue.js. You can still just use regular JavaScript, but the actual core development of Vue.js will be going into TypeScript, which is interesting. And there's this one thing that I wanted to talk about last week, which I didn't really have the time to talk about because just there's so many other things to talk about, but there's a big library called MobX, and it is a awesome library for managing state in your applications. It makes things very easy for updating, for observing, all those things. And they had a huge new update this past, a week ago with MobX 5. And the marquee feature of MobX 5 is that they've actually re-implemented the core of MobX to use proxy objects. Proxy objects being a new feature of ES 2017, something around there. And effectively it's a way for you to observe when you have people are trying to access properties or trying to set properties or trying to access functions or info functions on an object. So you can actually have this huge introspection and hooks into how are people interacting with objects. And it's a very powerful feature. However, it's one that only exists in modern browsers. So what that means is that MobX has now re-implemented their core in MobX 5 to use proxies, which means that it does not support IE at all, which is, I think, probably a safe thing to say for a library. They're still going to have MobX 4, which will support older versions of browsers like IE, but MobX 5 is requires proxies, and it's just modern browsers and beyond. And there's an interesting tweet this past week from the maintainer of MobX about how even though MobX itself is only targeting browsers that support ES6 plus features, they still had to build the MobX library to be an ES5 build due to the crappy ecosystem that it's around bundlers and actually knowing when to transpile projects and modules in your node modules folder. Which means to say if you have a project you depend upon MobX, by default most bundlers like Webpack or Parcel will not transpile the code in your node modules folder. And that's a pain because if you have ES future features, when you're trying to uglify that, you run into all sorts of issues. So because this is not a solved problem, they actually had to go back and transpile MobX 5 to actually be transpiled for ES5, even though it will never actually work in an ES5 browser. That's the silly world of JavaScript that we live in right now. And let's talk about React. I promise you I talk about this. Two awesome things talked about this past week in the world of React. One is there was a sneak peek of React Suspense, specifically showing how you could actually do code splitting with React Suspense. And again, there's another library out there in the ecosystem called React Loadable. I use it at work. It's awesome for code splitting. But there's a very subtle difference between how React Suspense will allow you to do lazy loading and how React Loadable does it. When you have an application and you have React Loadable, when you load that new page, the entire page will load and there'll be kind of like a hole where you wait for that component to actually be fetched and then rendered on the page. Whereas React Suspense, if you're on the page A and you want to go to page B, and that page B has that lazy loaded component, what React Suspense will actually allow you to do is say, I want to go to that page, like you tell React you're doing that, and React will say, oh, there's actually this component that I have to suspend on. So actually it'll keep showing you page A, wait for all of page B to be done before just switching to page B entirely. There's no hole at all. There's just a wholesale A to B, no hole. This is probably a bigger topic to go over so slowly right now, but I can get into that in a later episode or breakup episode. But that's kind of cool to see that this is another concern that the React team is looking into solving with React Suspense. And also React Native had a big blog post, the State of React Native 2018, which is probably way overdue. This is mostly just them communicating some of their internal work to the external world, and primarily that means that they have been working for the past couple of months on a re-implementation of the core of React Native. The code name for this new implementation of the core of React Native is called Fabric. You might have remembered in the past with React 16 they re-implemented the core and they called that Fiber. Well, with React Native they're calling it Fabric for reasons I don't know, but it's them trying to pretty much take all the things they've learned for the past couple of years with React Native and fix that with this new implemented core. The blog post goes into details about how they're trying to have more ways of actually communicating from the JavaScript thread to the native thread, having there actually be a synchronous option as well. Some very interesting things in there to actually solve a lot of the pain points that they've been experiencing in the past couple of years. So that's still to come. It'll hopefully make, also a thing they're trying to say that's going to be better is interacting between React Native code and native code. If they can make that story better, that's going to be amazing, because that's definitely one of the worst parts of React Native, but if they can fix that, then that will not be a bad part anymore. So React stuff, things are happening, still to become. It's all these teasing things, but I mean, the teams will do what they can, and I can't wait to play with them. Okay, and that was the console log, episode number 40. Hopefully you understood a word that I said, because I feel like I'm talking right through my nose. Apologies for that, but not really, because when you get sick, that's what happens, and I don't apologize for getting sick. I apologize that I am sick, because I don't like being sick, and I feel sick when I'm sick, which is sickening. Also, it's Father's Day tomorrow, my first Father's Day. Very exciting. I hope you have a good Father's Day for yourself as well, either you are a father or you have a father. So happy Father's Day to you. And I will talk to you again the following week when it is a no week of news that I can tell you about. News to tell you about news to